The murder of a young nursing student at the hands of an illegal immigrant is the impetus of the Laken Riley Act. It wasn't just a major political issue in the 2024 election, but it's turned into federal legislation that's passed the U.S. House and is now in the U.S. Senate. But some people coming out opposing that, claiming due process issues. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, and Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, a Democrat, has joined with others in a letter penned by New York Attorney General Letitia James, saying that the U.S. Senate should oppose the Laken Riley Act. Now, this act essentially would say that if somebody who's here as an illegal immigrant is accused of things like robbery, well, then they can be held indefinitely and then ultimately deported. This all stems from the murder of Laken Riley, where an illegal immigrant in this country illegally was actually apprehended for robbery, but was later released. And then the murder of Laken happened, and that individual is ultimately convicted of that crime. While the U.S. House passed the Laken Riley Act under Republican control, I believe all Illinois Democrat Congress members voted against that. But now it's in the U.S. Senate, and you've got Democrats coming out to oppose it in the U.S. Senate, which is now controlled by Republicans. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, he posted this letter last night saying that this proposal has clear due process issues and a high potential for abuse. It would severely strain our nation's already overburdened immigration system and make law enforcement officers' jobs more difficult by potentially fracturing trust with the communities they serve. Raoul said that he stands with other states' attorney generals to essentially oppose this measure in the Senate, urging the Senate to reject the legislation. So Raoul, interesting here that he supported a recent measure out of Illinois that gun rights advocates had opposed because they say it did away with individuals' due process rights when they're facing orders of protection. That was Karina's bill. That measure passed the General Assembly in the lame duck session, essentially would say that if somebody is the subject of an order of protection, then their firearms are to be confiscated by law enforcement. But gun rights advocates said that that does away with due process rights, as the individual as the subject of the order of protection doesn't have a hearing in front of their accuser with evidence presented before a final determination is made to take away those firearms. So clearly interesting to see here the due process issues. Let's take a look here at Letitia James's letter opposing the Laken Riley Act, saying that we are especially concerned about how this law could be weaponized by domestic abusers. In domestic violence situations, it's common that the perpetrator makes false accusations of property theft against their victim, resulting in arrest of both people after an abuse incident. Even if charges against the victim are not pursued, Immigration Customs Enforcement would be required to jail the victim if they lacked immigration status. The threat of ICE detention would become another tool of control in domestic violence situations and will certainly deter victims from coming forward. So an interesting kind of double standard here that we're seeing when it comes to the issue of due process in the Laken Riley Act, but then look at the Karina's bill that passed concerning firearm confiscation, and gun rights advocates saying that the Karina's bill does away with due process. Now, this issue came up recently. Josh Hawley, a U.S. Senator from Missouri, he questioned a Democrat witness about statements they had made about migrant crime and the association with the Laken Riley Act.
Wrote, the murder of a nursing student in Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime like it's an actual issue. That'd be Laken Riley you were talking about?
Laken Riley was an unusual case.
Yeah, here, let's have a look. Here's Laken Riley.
Yes.
Her murder, her horrific murder at the hands of this illegal migrant who was also unlawfully paroled in the United States. Her death, not an actual issue?
It's a tragedy.
But not an actual issue?
Migrant crime is much less of an issue than U.S. citizen committed crime.
Not an actual issue? Those are your words. Her death, not an actual issue. I just want to get, no, you say.
Of course it's an issue. It's a tragedy.
So what do you mean by your post? It's not an actual issue, meaning we shouldn't be paying attention to it. Senate's wasting its time this week on the Laken Riley Acts that would address the circumstances of her murder. What's your advice to us? We just discontinue those proceedings now?
I think the Laken Riley Act could do a lot of harm. It would allow me to say, oh, this person shoplifted, and that would be enough probable cause to get somebody deported.
Interesting. You're here, who invited you to this committee hearing today, Mr. Isaacson?
The minority party.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're here as a spokesman for the minority party. I just want to make sure the record's clear on this. The spokesman for the minority party is advising the Senate that the Laken Riley Act is a bad idea and we ought to stop it. The spokesman for the minority party is saying that Laken Riley's death and migrant crime is not an actual issue. I can't frankly believe that I am hearing these words. You said it's not an actual issue. I read you the quote.
Laken Riley's death was not an actual issue.
You said that the murder of a nursing student in Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime. You put it in quotation marks, square quotes, like it's an actual issue. She's dead because of migrant crime, right?
We'll be watching what happens in the U.S. Senate. I'm going to guess that's the U.S. senators from Illinois, Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin, will oppose this measure. And you've got to also think about other migrant crime that's allegedly happened not too long ago in Springfield. A young woman was murdered, and ultimately police were looking for an individual here as a member of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. They're still searching for that suspect. It's believed that suspect fled to Mexico. So clearly a lot of concern here about migrant crime and the issue of due process, showing a double standard when it comes to the Laken Riley Act versus Karina's Law. We'll be watching closely here with Illinois in Focus Daily.